to the second video in this series of lessons in which I'm outlining how and why I like to incorporate a few arpeggios into scale-based solos. And if you've watched the first video, you'll know that we used a Major Triad arpeggio with just one fingering pattern to add a bit of extra colour when soloing over a dominant 7 chord. And just in case you haven't seen the first video, here's a very quick recap. We used this fingering pattern for a C major triad arpeggio across 3 octaves. And you'll see that it's actually just one pattern that repeats on each pair of strings. And the best fingering for that pattern is 2-1-4. In other words, C is played with the second finger, E with the first, and G with the fourth. And that fingering pattern applies across each pair of strings. Now, if you haven't seen the first video, please check it out because the things we'll be looking at in this video naturally follow on from it. And I'm sure you'll be very pleased to know that in this video we'll be using exactly the same major triad arpeggio we used in the first video. So there's no new fingering pattern to learn, but this time we'll be using it over a major 7 chord and also a minor chord. So let's start with how we might use it over a major 7 chord. Well, a major 7 chord is just a basic major chord or triad with an added 7th note from the underlying major scale. And ordinarily, if I was soloing over a C major 7 chord, I'd probably use the C major scale and possibly the C major pentatonic scale. But as we found in the last lesson, incorporating an arpeggio or two into a solo can be really effective because arpeggios tend to have wider note intervals than most scales, and therefore they can add a sound and a feel to a solo that we wouldn't normally get using just scales. Now, the C major triad arpeggio we used in the previous lesson contains the notes C, E and G, so obviously we can use that over a C major 7 chord because the arpeggio contains 3 of the 4 notes in the chord. And you'll recall that in the previous video, when we were playing over a C7 chord, a dominant chord, we used B flat as the target note because that's the note which gives the C7 chord its characteristic sound. Well, this time we'll apply exactly the same principle, but as the chord is a C major 7, the target note will be B because that's the note that gives the C major 7 chord its characteristic sound. So here's the 3 octave arpeggio we used in the first video. And now we can add B as a target note. So when we get to the top octave, we come back down from G, E, C, and then land on the B, which is the 12th fret of the B string. Another thing we did in the first video was add some chromatic notes to the C major triad arpeggio, and we can do the same here. So let's take the top octave for example. So we'll go from C to E and then chromatically up from E to G. And then when we play the E again, we'll just slide into it and then C and then just B because that's our target note. And that of course can be replicated in all 3 octaves. So now let's expand the major triad arpeggio into a 4-note major 7 arpeggio by adding the B note to each octave. So that would give us this major 7 arpeggio fingering pattern, which is the same as our major triad arpeggio, but we're now just adding the B note with the first finger 1 fret down from the C note in each octave. And to add a more angular sound to this major 7 arpeggio, we can play the highest note on each string first. So instead of playing B to C, E to G, let's play C to B, and then G to E. And then we can do the reverse when we play the arpeggio descending. So instead of playing G, E, C, B, we'll play E, G, B, C, and we'll do that in all 3 octaves. So we now have a few arpeggio based ideas that we can use over a major 7 chord. Now I'm sure you know that every major chord has a relative minor, which is 3 frets down from the major. So if we take C major as an example, the relative minor is A minor. And if we look at the notes of, say, an A minor 7 chord, they are A, C, E and G. In other words, an A minor chord contains the notes of a C major triad, C, E and G. So this means we can play any of our C major based arpeggio licks over an A minor chord. Here's a short improvisation over an A minor to G to F chord progression, and I'll try and mix some scale-based licks with some of the arpeggio ideas we've just looked at. So I hope you can see how incorporating a few arpeggio ideas into scale-based solos can really help to add a certain sound and feel that you probably wouldn't normally get from just using scales. Now I really hope you found this lesson useful, and if you have, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next lesson where we'll be looking at some more arpeggio related soloing ideas. Thanks for watching, see you next time.